So, Joseph and Albert, welcome. This is our first podcast together.
Yeah. Thank you.
We have a number of people who come to us who are not the accused themselves, but the parents of an accused. And this is becoming more and more common. We've talked about it a number of times, Joseph and I. What's going on at university level and for young kids and the dangers they face with allegations. And, it's worth revisiting because when somebody's in school and they're charged, they also face expulsion unless they participate in sort of pseudo-legal investigations in the university system. And we've kind of talked about it a little bit before doing the podcast, but there's an attitude in younger people, specifically younger women, that is contributing to a bigger danger to young men. And one of those things is a postmodernist type of attitude about reality, subjective reality, and misunderstandings of consent.
Accountability, I think, as well.
Right.
Is in the worldview that is causing these kind of misunderstandings, where there's a completely asymmetrical understanding of who's accountable for what in the relationship or the exchange, so to speak. So, I mean, I survived university, thankfully, but I've been there for the last little while, and you really do see it a lot. It's very seeped into the culture, and they lecture you on it, the seminars and the workshops and the posters and all the messaging around consent is so not just at odds with the law, but also with human experience, right? So it's rewriting the way they approach this issue.
And that's one of the things too, is that, and we've said a number of times before as well, that the expectations go against, like you said, human behavior and the way people actually engage in sexual behavior with each other as actual real people in the circumstances, which unfortunately for young people often involves alcohol.
Yeah.
And so that becomes
culture as well.
A problem as well. And so, but this postmodernism is, something, our viewers have expressed some interest in, but it's also unknown by a number of people. So can you explain a little bit what postmodernism is?
Postmodernism, I guess it originates with Foucault, or was it the German school of philosophy, right? The German historical school.
I'm watching a Blue Jay score.
Yeah, totally fair.
No, go ahead.
I'll try to dumb it down, but it's so hard to pin down. It's so pervasive. It's like,
I think it's intentionally hard to pin down, to tell you the truth, because in practical reality, postmodernism is anything is real if you believe it to be real. In the end, that's where we ended up with, your subjective experience and what you believe to be true is more important than anybody else's. But at the same time, everybody else's view of reality is also important to you.
Equally true. That's definitely one of the facets of it. It's this idea that truth is relative, right? Truth, beauty. It's against all value systems, really. Value itself is subjective, and truth and beauty being two values that come to mind. And the idea that all of life consists of power relationships between different groups of people, men and women being one that gets talked about a lot. And once you boil down everything to a power relationship, things like truth, and I've heard this said, objective truth, the idea of objectivity is itself a construct used to, what do they say, to the cultural hegemony, to further the cultural hegemony or something like that. So everything down to science, to truth, to whatever, it's all relative, and it all
tools of the
projects,
patriarchy.
Tools of the patriarchy. And that's the word, right? Patriarchy.
Yeah.
It's this all pervasive
so
thing.
This is the thing, is it's not just a philosophical thing, it's very entwined with feminism, because you talk about power structures, and it always whittles down to everybody's truth is valid unless you're a member of the patriarchy, which
Correct.
means unless you're male.
Correct.
Right? So this is one of the problems that young men have growing up, where they're so they're educated in this and come to believe that their opinion, I think, and that their experience of the world has less value, and they become less able to navigate situations, social situations?
Well, they're cast off as these members who have unique, this version of original sin, right? And I grew up with that, around that idea, and it's implicit. And I think people may object to it if you say it out loud. And when you start complaining about it, it's like, woe is me, the white man is talking. But, it's there. And that comes into the way we approach law and consent and issues of consent, because it's a sort of justification. It's the grounds for a sort of justification, where I like to think of it as liability, right? You have two people in a human relationship and you're entering into some sort of exchange. You have commercial exchanges, you have platonic exchanges, and you have romantic exchanges as well, all sorts of different human relationships. Now, in that romantic exchange, this is someone you've just met. You're going into private, somewhere secluded, say a room at a party. You're a university student in a busy party. All alone in that room, no one's there, no witnesses. Doors locked maybe. That's a very vulnerable position with a stranger.
Right. So let's talk about the legal aspects about what happens once you do enter into an isolated space with somebody who's going to then represent what happened, their subjective view of it. And how is it that somebody gets charged with no proof other than somebody saying it?
Are we focused, though, to some extent on this episode about, the exposure or the risk of students at universities? Because I just want to remind people for a moment, because we've been dealing with this now for a decade, where we've seen an uptick in cases. And it's important to remember that maybe about 5, 6 years ago, 7 years ago, 8 years ago, there was a big push on campuses to deal with issues surrounding literally, there were protests on campuses about misogyny and rape culture, and and to support survivors of sexual assault. That there was this push to recognize that in universities, not just one particular university, but a number of universities in Canada, that this was very prevalent. Out of that grew, this education about consent and other things, and then and whether there's violence going on in universities, it's just a microcosm of society. I mean, it happens everywhere, but it really went extremely far. So I just want to remember the fact that this came out of a movement, not out of touch with the Me Too movement at the same time. Okay, and we've dealt with a lot of cases involving students who are particularly vulnerable in university and now also in high school, because of a general view of masculinity and a general view of toxic masculinity, and that still is alive and well until today. So, when you have a situation where two people are alone, and whether it's students at a university, students at a high school, wherever, you're looking at two individuals who are engaging, but what comes out of that, if an allegation comes out of it, is a complainant will simply tell somebody, a person in authority, or eventually go to the police and make a complaint, and their statement becomes, as we've talked about a million times on this podcast, becomes evidence of which somebody gets charged, and can become sufficient evidence when testified to at a trial to convict somebody. So that's a very powerful tool that's available to a person who truly has been abused, but it's a very powerful tool also to abuse. And I guess part of why we were reviewing university settings and school settings is we've seen this in universities perpetuate and continue to perpetuate, where we've had many, many male students come to us and say, this is not what happened, and my academic life is in the shitter, I'm in deep trouble. And now we're seeing it also in high school, grades 11 and 12. And there still isn't, I think, the shift a little bit to understanding human interactions, and that these allegations can be just ripe for fabrication as much as it can in other spheres.
And of course, when an allegation happens in a school setting, there's a lot of academic pressure to respond to internal investigations. And that can be really dangerous in terms of the allegations going from just a school setting to becoming criminal charges. Yeah. And if they refuse to participate in an internal investigation, then they can be expelled for refusal to participate. But when they do participate, they don't have the same protections that we have in the criminal system where they have rights to disclosure. So they're having to respond to general summaries of allegations and not actual statements that are given. And that can complicate things because they're, like we had a client recently too, talking about their inability to talk to their own witnesses because of parameters put on them in the school system.
Yeah, I think it's important. I mean, again, we're revisiting, because this week alone we're retained by two people, two actually in university and one in high school. And something that we've spoken about before is this. So a complaint can go forward first to the university. The university will then immediately contact the male student who's the accused and either suspend them or ban them or trespass them to the university. An investigation will ensue. And as you said, all that's given to a person who's accused is a summary. So all they get is a very short form summary of what the allegation is. That's turned over to the student, and then the student is asked to respond to it. Now, of course, we've seen this, unfortunately, as recent as now. Students are under pressure because they want to complete their school year. They want to complete their degree. And we've seen this with other students who are now in highly specialized programs, and they're like terrified because I might not be able to get into another engineering program. I won't be able to get into another BCom program. So they then may consult with some lawyer, and they wind up giving a statement. That statement has zero protection. So in other words, it's relied upon by the university. It will be in rare circumstances the university will actually, we've had it only in one case, where a university will find in favor of the, we had it in two, will find in favor of the accused student, rarely, and often it will just result in nothing changing, that the student will be banned from the school, and they'll come up with some alternative arrangement to try and help them finish their year, but it's extremely restrictive and it's very difficult. So cooperation and giving that statement is not a protected statement. It's in the hands of the university. It will, and it can become a statement that goes into the hands of the police if the complainant wants to further it and go to a criminal allegation. That's something people should be starkly aware of, and we want to make it very clear. If somebody's watching and they're a university student, and I know others in this situation, whatever cooperation, whatever statement you provide, the two of you are nodding your heads. It's so interesting. It's very helpful, guys. Will automatically become evidence against you.
Yeah.
So what evidence do they get? You said they get a summary.
They just get a summary. It'll say, such and such said on September 2nd, you were at a party, you were drunk, and you sexually assaulted her.
Very, very
I'm being a little facetious, but it really is pretty thin.
And they can redact a ton of stuff, and they have no right to have unredacted versions of statements.
And more importantly, there can be other people. So the university can get information from other people who are present. You don't necessarily get a summary of that evidence, so you don't know who they are. And so you're not really in a position of being able to assess what you're facing to give a comprehensive response.
So they don't have the right to know the case to meet?
No, nothing at all, no.
No.
So do you guys know where that came from, that right?
Pressure to have justice for victims in the university lobbyist groups.
No. I mean the common law right of knowing the case to meet.
Oh.
I read about this recently. I feel very brave asking Joseph a question right now. You know, like, do you know Joseph? I can give the answer.
Actually, the actual origin of it, I'm not aware of at the moment.
The right to disclosure and knowing the full case to meet?
Because in Canada, it's evolved.
Yeah, I wouldn't be able to talk about the history of it so
Justice
much.
_𝐸𝐸𝐸 writes about it in his book, Getting Away with Murder.
I love everything 𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸.
Yeah.
Go, just
1999.
regale me with anything
and he
𝐸𝐸𝐸.
wrote that book for the public as a defense of the criminal justice system. So very appropriate plug in this podcast, and
because
very
it never became a serious consideration until the 𝐷𝐿𝐴𝐻𝐿 case.
Right. So the common law origin of that right goes back to the courts of Star Chamber. You guys familiar with those?
Yeah.
They were like inquisitorial courts they were enforcing religious dogma. So you were arrested for what would it be? What's the word in the religious?
Witchcraft?
Heresy?
Yeah, heresy. Thank you. So you're arrested for heresy, and the issue is, I think this is like 12th, 13th century. Like I'm probably getting that wrong. Somebody can correct me in the comments, but
I wasn't alive then,
Yeah, Joseph wasn't alive back then.
in spite of my hair color.
And essentially, the issue back then was that most people didn't know how to read, didn't have access to the Bible. So they didn't know what heresy was and wasn't. These were like very arcane, esoteric conversations going on with the clergy. So somebody accuses you of heresy. You're sitting there, you don't know what you're accused of. And they're asking you questions like, well, what did you say this time? What did you say that time? But you don't know what's illegal and what's not. You don't know what the heresy is. So it's very hard to testify. And I forget exactly how it develops, but there was protests around this. And
I just see such a similarity in the way language is used at universities now, that you don't know what you're accused of, and they're saying things to you that you can't understand.
Look, guys, let's bring it more to the present, because
can I tie it back?
A small diversion.
Can I tie it back to our point about consent? Yeah. People don't know what consent is. You're accused of something. These university students, they don't understand exactly the meaning, the legal definition of consent. So they're sitting there accused of something they don't know what.
Well, the reality is, look, I mean, to be fair, the reality is it's a pretty simple concept. The other party should be agreeing to the sexual act that you want to engage in. So it's not something that should be that hard. And as parents, we hopefully teach our children what consent means. And they don't have to have, the leading seminal cases from the Supreme Court of Canada.
But it's a bit counterintuitive in the law.
So what the way the law defines it, and there's the subjective element to it, but it's based upon an objective assessment as to whether the elements were there for consent. It's the way the court has to operate. But at a very...
How dare you? Objective assessment?
Well, yeah, there's...
That's so not today. It's so not today.
I still feel pretty good about how our courts generally look at it. But the reality is, I mean, the basic concept of it is something we should all know and deal with. But it becomes much more murky when you're being taught certain things that constitutes non-consent, and that's just not accurate. It's just not true.
Or that they believe vitiates consent.
And when it's it's not your responsibility, or as we like the term, you have no agency in the act. That's where this starts to become very murky and a problem. And we see this over and over and over and over in cases involving students.
I think students may also be confused about the idea that if their partner does not tell them explicitly, I no longer consent, or say no, or stop, or can you stop please, then they can still withdraw their consent silently.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they have to somehow read their mind. And, there's obviously, there's different cases where it's more obvious or less obvious. But even in those nuanced cases, like you can get into a misunderstanding, not be told, and then there was no consent. And that's
be honest,
confusing
a mistaken belief in consent.
Yeah, but then you have...
narrow.
No, it's actually not as bad as you think.
We had
I mean, it's not as bad as you think, that defense. But the reality is, we're jumping around to a lot of topics. But when you talked about the case to meet, I just wanted to say something about it. In Canada, prior to the charter and prior to proper full disclosure in 𝐶𝐿𝐏𝐄, you'd get like a fucking summary of a complainant's statement. And it would be just written out, and maybe it would be in the police officer's notes. And maybe you'd get the complete set of notes. I mean, it was just a different era, okay? So when you talk about the case to meet, I almost laugh about what the origin is, because it really didn't become something fairly significant until the later 90s and in the 2000s when 𝐶𝐿𝐏𝐄 came around. Because when I was a young lawyer back in the dinosaur era, I'd go to court and I'd ask the officer, can I read your notes? Like, I'd get a summary of the complainant's statement and a few other things. And there would be the odd occasion, oh my God, they'd audio record something. But like, you're getting disclosure almost while you're doing the trial.
I still don't know how you read the notes. I've seen the notes.
I know.
You learn, but
yeah. If you can learn to read his handwriting, you can read anything.
That's right. Like, I write practically in hieroglyphics. Okay, but leaving that aside,
Egyptian hieroglyphics.
You're right about the nuances when it comes to understanding consent, but the difficulty really emanates, and we see it never ending now, with students who are being charged and continue to be charged, because this is not waning. There still continues to be an almost intentional, misguided approach to establishing what consent is and what it isn't, what vitiates consent, and whose responsibility it is, which is the male. And when you add in alcohol, it's even worse. This episode is sponsored by EasyDNS. EasyDNS is a domain name registrar, and host that has a 30-year track record in the domain and web hosting industry. Whether it be cancel culture, platform attacks, or nefarious actors online, move your domain and web hosting over to EasyDNS, one of the most secure web hosting services, and help support Not on Record in the process. All you have to do is go to easydns.com/notonrecord, or when you sign up at EasyDNS, use the promo code NOTONRECORD at checkout. Thank you, EasyDNS, for your support of Not on Record. And now back to our podcast. Thank you.
And actually, there's two things that we've noticed in a university setting. So one is what's been called relabeling, which is where a sexual encounter happens, and then a person tells somebody about the sexual encounter, and then their peers and potentially even family members get involved and say to them, "That wasn't consent. This isn't, this wasn't something that should have happened to you."
Relabeling is a phenomenon we see, with a lot of people who are younger, and it happens, but it's not just within a university setting. But yeah, that happens. And let me just go back. I'm sorry, this is a fucking ADHD podcast. I apologize, everybody. But it's totally, we're all over the place. But if you're in a university setting and this is happening, just be aware that when the university wants you to respond to a complaint, that is not a protected statement. It's not confidential. It can wind up in the hands of the police and therefore can form a basis of a criminal charge. Just be aware of that.
Right.
Okay? Now, be aware also that, in the university setting, it's extremely clear that there is not clear guidance given or teaching given to students, male and female, about really what consent is in relations. Although I completely understand why they want to say we want to err on the side of caution and make sure everybody understands that they have to respect each other's privacy and bodily integrity. I get that. But we still have, unfortunately, this problem with how this is how certain people are being indoctrinated within that environment.
I think what they're teaching is what they think interaction should be like, but what they're teaching the people about consent, because there are consent courses on universities, doesn't actually match the law.
It doesn't. Some are getting much better now, because I've actually looked at a couple, but it is a problem. And then the other thing is the human dynamic that's at play in universities with young people who may be in a situation where they engage in something consensually, but then afterward, like, oh, and then you speak to your peers, and your peers are going, well, that's not correct. That's not consent. You had 3 sips of that tequila, and you couldn't have consented, and that's his fault. And then you're embarrassed because the person you were with is not really the captain of the football team, although they said they were. They're actually the captain.
They're just the kicker.
They're
not actually
There's
going...
nothing wrong with kickers. Holy shit. 65-yard kick. Like, that's impressive shit. But like they're the head of the drama club. I'm just kidding. There's nothing wrong with drama.
No, but like
someone's going to be very upset with this example.
It's been asked.
I'm going to piss off somebody for sure.
It's been asked, is your consent vitiated if they tell you they're going to med school, but it turns out they're going to art school?
Oh, fraud. As to your
Is
identity,
it vitiated
right?
by fraud? That's one of the things. Is like they try to make it a thing that if you lie about what your major is, and the person believes that you have a higher income potential.
Holy
If you lie about your identity, yeah.
Right.
I mean, in principle, I don't know if this is tested. You would know maybe, but
Oh my God.
It's been attempted, but
Has
they've turned that down.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah, they've turned down that in terms of what compromises fraud. But the other thing that we've
I
actually
didn't hear they tried that. Wait, was that in Canada?
Oh yeah, they've tried it everywhere. Typically, all this kind of legislation, they test it in Australia first, and then they try it in Canada, and then it goes to the US. Australia, I think, is worse off than us.
Oh yeah, they are.
Yeah. So
in many ways.
and
But
the other thing we've seen, aside from just a person telling an embarrassing story and then being convinced what happened to them as sexual assault, is that we have seen in university settings that people, especially because they're going out for the first time away from parents and stuff, they get intoxicated more so than they should have, make a mistake, and then want to get ahead of an embarrassing story because they slept with somebody that they wouldn't have normally slept with. And they try to get ahead of that story by spreading a rumor first and trying to prevent the person from saying it was consensual.
so that's another the other way around too. Somebody's a little bit excited and they make an advance that they thought was welcome, but it's not.
Right, and that's one of the...
But this is like... These are young people who are inexperienced in life for the first time away on their own in some of these cases, because some of this happens where people are still at university in the city that they live in, there's nothing wrong with that. But they're experiencing independence and growth in a different way, trying to navigate all the intricacies of human interaction with all this like freedom and fun and fucking frosh week and drinking and shit and all that stuff. And it's difficult. And there's not enough allowance for these mistakes these days. And I don't care if somebody criticizes me for this to say mistakes, because sometimes things are really not intentional and mistakes happen when people are a little sloppy when they're drinking. I'm not talking about what we consider to be a rape. I'm considering about other cases that we have where it's nobody set out to harm anybody. But people are charged, and it's very sad. But I don't know. It's continuing. I mean, literally this week alone, 2 cases.
Yeah, and so we were talking a little bit earlier about Ernest Becker, who I know I've mentioned before too, and he whittles life's problems down to needing to feel like a person of worth.
That's not the former tennis player.
No.
Who's that guy?
Ernest Becker.
He lost all his money. Boris Becker. He was a great tennis player, just lost all his money.
Ernest Becker wrote Escape from Evil.
I don't know, tax
we
or
need to feel like a person of worth in a world.
Tennis, hockey.
Yeah, they said they were the quarterback, but they were just a tax man.
Anyways, what were you going to say about him?
The dilemma that people face is needing to be a person of worth in a world.
The ADHD podcast. Universities, non-consent, drinking, f***ing up, and ADHD. It's all in one.
A person of worth in a world of meaning. And the first part is what young people are facing. As much as we like to think that we don't care what people think of us, we do. And that's and that's a big motivating factor, is being embarrassed about things. And I've always said that I think embarrassment needs to be studied more closely. It's a powerful emotion.
Shame.
But that is not a reason to fabricate. That never happens.
No.
That's a myth.
That's a myth. Embarrassment's a myth.
Well, motive to fabricate can be a number of things. Reason to fabricate, I think, is what you're saying. Embarrassment is not a good enough reason to fabricate.
That would be a myth, too.
Well, fabrication is a myth.
Fabrication is a myth.
Yeah.
Well, we
Is
have that
fabrication
from
in the room with us right now?
a Wanchuk.
I'm just being provocative right now.
We have a case, a Wanchuk that says, Justice Leroux-Dubé says that it's a myth to say that women lie about rape. Therefore, every allegation must be true. It's like really what that would mean if it was true.
It's only been adjusted over some 20 some odd years or longer to say it's rare, right?
Now, you mentioned Me Too, near the beginning as well.
Me Too is important because we saw, and again, I don't want to discount the reality that within university settings, it's ripe for abuse. There are things that happen, and there's nothing wrong with students coming out and saying this is what exists on campus. It's a risk to females, risk to males, risk to others, and needs to be acknowledged. But there really was this outpouring around the same time of this vitriol about misogyny, toxic masculinity, rape culture, all that stuff. And it takes you to such an extreme, yet we haven't pulled back on that, because I think you and I have talked about to some extent that within sexual assault case law and understanding within the courts and the general public, there's been a bit of a swing backward to being a little bit more calmer, being a little bit more rational, doing more of an analysis on what you're being told about with respect to these allegations. That hasn't quite hit the universities yet, at least from the amount of cases that we're getting.
Well, I think one of the problems is that people can get instant fame on the internet from doing, it used to be sign videos. You hold up a whole bunch of signs saying,
oh my God, you didn't get anything from
like nice music playing, and you just hold up signs without actually saying anything, and you tell some sob story about being violated in some way, and then everybody likes you, and you get internet famous, and then it passes. And then they're struggling to get fame back again. But that's the way it works for people of that age group, is that they can get 2 million views on the internet by doing a video or making a post of allegations. So
I never thought that was the issue. Not gaining fame, but I always thought it was you have unlimited power to assassinate somebody with no repercussions.
No, a lot of it is a search for, we've seen in some cases
validation.
We've done where certain complainants may be exaggerating or fabricating simply because they're looking for identity. If I can put it that way, they're looking for identity. They're looking for not just validation, but literally something, a purpose. They're not, again, I'm going to get ridiculed for this, But we've seen this where people are searching for their place, their purpose, their identity, and by identifying as a victim.
They're part of the underdogs. They belong.
But it gives them attention and importance and an identity, something that fulfills something that's missing, and that's a reality.
It's deemed heroic, and like Joseph Campbell said, the hero's journey and stuff. It's like, this idea of being seen and called a hero just simply for saying things.
I had a case prior to you joining the practice where it was very much this. And in the end, it was really quite sad. And I forgot exactly how it came out in cross-examination, but after one of my longer cross-examinations, it really was a cry of somebody trying to get attention. And a lot of people will tell you that I was just full of shit and that that's not true. But the client was acquitted and it was acknowledged by the judge. But it's a reality. And it's been in existence for a long time, but made worse because of social media.
And I mean, like, to be clear, and I think we've made it clear, is we're not saying that all people who make complaints are like this. We're just saying it happens.
I want to be clear again, we've never said that. There is real abuse. There are people who are being abused. And in a perfect world, we'd love all that to stop and we can go on and do something else with our lives. I'd be happy with no crime. I could open up Watch and Scotch finally and go do something else. Like, I don't mind. By the way, in case you're interested and you want to invest in the business, we want to sell pre-owned watches, right, honey? Yeah. Have really nice wooden floor, distressed leather furniture, and a Scotch bar at the back with some nice jazz playing.
And write books.
But we don't touch the inventory.
Of course I'm touching the fucking inventory. But anyways, so this really exists. But getting across that there are an inordinate amount of cases where there is fabrication, it exists. And it hit us this week where we're dealing with we've got 2 cases already again with university.
And thankfully they found us.
And people were compelled to give statements, and you just see the ripple effect from that. And then sadly in one of these cases how trying to defend it was completely misunderstood. Like, we're second counsel, and I don't want to disparage anybody, but there was a complete lack of understanding about how to go about to structure a defense and what you got to do. Kids are vulnerable, and I really want us to make a better effort as a society to address both sides. Yeah. The potential accused and the potential victim.
And understanding the cost to a young person's life and future when this happens to them, before they've even finished completing their degree.
One kid I'm dealing with who's young, the age of one of my children. Basically, we've encouraged the parent to get them into therapy and get them into treatment. Suicidal ideation. I mean, Clearly. I mean, it's like we've always said, it's life altering.
It is.
Life altering.
And that's one of the things too that, I've commented on before, where we've had cases like in the 𝐔𝐿𝐒 where 𝐕𝐈𝐃𝐄 was out in the media saying, "Oh, jail wouldn't do anything; it'd be like a timeout," And there's like this idea that, and it's growing up female and the queen bees and bullies and stuff like that. There is an idea that you just attack somebody's character and then you just move on to somebody else and just forget about it and just think life carries on. And quite often that person does end up just being happy that they're in the shade and nobody's paying attention to them. They just move on to next bully, target after the other. But there's no actual understanding of the consequences, the serious consequences to somebody's life and future.
And this is the thing, right, about the patriarchy and all men are somehow to blame for this. So, well, they're men, and it's empowering as a woman to take power away from them, to knock them down a peg. Yeah. Even if it's not black and white, maybe you have some doubt. Oh, well, whatever, they're a man anyways. Like they've been taking up enough space. It's our turn, kind of this mentality.
Taking up space, so all the language.
Yeah, for sure. Oh my God, I can't. But
well, I hope we can move past that a little bit more. But I think sort of the moral of this all over the place episode was that still seeing in university settings this what I consider to be a very skewed way of dealing with allegations and how we teach students about it, and we've got to be careful because the effects are just as devastating there as it is in later on in life.
And we need our sons as much as we need our daughters.
We need them all, and we need them to have healthy lives, and we need to try and do a better way of of educating them in this regard. And then, I think also dealing with a dispute. But anyways, have we run long? We haven't? Okay, good.
Just seems like it.
No,
I'm jumping around so much.
What was the other point that we wanted to mention about the university's cases? There was one other thing that struck me. It's not just the investigation. Oh, yeah. So, because we get asked these questions, and we're not lawyers who specialize in education law, where you can actually hire a lawyer who can help you navigate. So we've done this for students who are at university and they're in a program like engineering, or they're completing a master's, or they're in business or medicine or whatever, and we have to get them to hire a lawyer to negotiate with the university. So it's extremely important that we get these questions, and it's like, they're already in a difficult position without having sought the right counsel. You need a lawyer if you're in, even if you're an undergrad, but if you're in, certain programs that lead directly to a career and you're terrified about how this is going to impact you, you need a lawyer who can negotiate between you and the university. And we don't often do that as criminal lawyers. We can do it, but it's not, it's not really our bailiwick. Right. There are lawyers who specialize in education law, and I could see in one of these instances, they would have really benefited from a consult with one of these lawyers who would have talked to them about the realities and how to go about it. And those lawyers typically work with the criminal lawyers to try and get something worked out.
So 2 lawyers, if you face an allegation.
Yeah, so just think about this for a second. So, I'm going to take one example of a student who is completing a master's in engineering and had worked with a specific company who wanted it to come back, and he was looking at, I think, a starting salary of about $150,000 a year. Okay, and he was looking at his inability to return to the school to complete his master's degree and maybe lose that job opportunity. Multiply that with wage increases over 30 years. So imagine your entire career being able to be wiped out just because of this. And then how do you negotiate with the university to try and at least salvage your degree?
It's probably highly leveraged too, student debt. I mean, not for sure, but maybe.
Assuming whether it's highly leveraged or, they're up to their eyeballs in debt to get that degree, or they've got the blessing, that they have parents who are able to do it. Either way, look at the fact that as you go out 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, that potential earning capacity could be gone. Their career can be gone. Everything can be over in a moment. So when you think about, I got to hire 2 lawyers, well, yeah, maybe. There are lawyers who specialize in education law and discipline within universities and schools that you actually should engage and work with the criminal lawyer to work something out. So for example, in that case, successfully, we were able to work out a return to university with certain restrictions, an ability to do exams in a certain way, and it didn't impede the record, and was able to complete the master's and go on to his employment. Not doing that can result in a university running right over you and expelling you. That's the other extreme.
That's one of the problems with university issues as well, is that there is no, unlike Canadian law, where it's pretty much universal, although it can be slightly different from province to province on minor details. It's pretty much, consistent. But in universities, they have their own policies, and each university's policy can be quite unique. So it's important to understand the policies that you're dealing with.
Yeah, they're supposed to be more uniform in how they handle acts of, because every university has to have a policy with respect to sexual violence and domestic violence of any kind. But I have seen varying degrees of how they can work with a student who is accused, and there's quite a difference, frankly. And the use of a very skilled lawyer who has those tools, working with a criminal lawyer, is able to create a situation where the student can salvage their education or academic career. And that's very important. That's something else I wanted to mention, because in one instance, we're aware of it, that it didn't happen, and it's had very dire consequences. So that's just a caution to whoever watches if people are interested. But I think we've exhausted this topic, and I'm going to...
Yeah. No, it's fun though.
I'm going to cheers.
Yeah.
Hey, this is number 2 for you. How many weeks has it been at the office?
It's my 3rd week.
Wow, and 2 episodes under your belt.
And,
well done.
I look forward to talking postmodernism with you further.
Well. Joseph, maybe, I don't know.
We'll give you the highlights.
Not me. I'll be on my phone looking at other things. Pillow Talk.
Oh, right. So if you want to see more of these, it's in your best interest to like, subscribe, and comment.
and share.
We read the comments. Share, especially share with everybody. And
thank you, EasyDNS.
yeah.
Very good. Yes. Thank you to our sponsor, EasyDNS. Thank you for reminding us. They are a secure platform for your web hosting and other needs. So we're very thankful for their continued support of this podcast. And thank you for sending in to the viewers questions and comments. There's a lot of stuff that people want us to cover. We'll try and get to everything. So have a good night, and thank you very much. Catch you next week.